Her voice, her words, recorded by the FBI in her own office. The American people are fundamentally stupid. Democracy is just a word we use while we make the real decisions. That's Nancy Pelosi, the woman who turned a $174,000 salary into $427 million, explaining to Chinese intelligence officers how she really views the voters who elected her for 37 years. When she attacked FBI Director Kash Patel as a lying, unqualified hack, she had no idea he was sitting on 20 years of surveillance recordings, trading documents, and evidence of foreign payments totaling $47 million. What happened next will be studied in law schools for generations. Opening hook narrative. You lying, unqualified hack. Nancy's voice cracked with fury as she pointed at FBI Director Kash Patel. You've weaponized the FBI into Trump's personal revenge squad. The chamber fell silent. Nancy Pelosi had just gone for the kill shot, the kind of vicious attack that had ended political careers for decades. Except something was wrong. Kash Patel sat perfectly still, no defensive anger, no stuttering confusion. Just that quiet prosecutor's look every criminal recognized too late. Madam Speaker, he said, reaching for a briefcase marked Director's Eyes Only. Since you've questioned my qualifications so passionately, let me show you what 20 years of FBI investigation has discovered about your qualifications. He pulled out a digital recorder. But first let me play what you really think about the American people. The Senate Judiciary Oversight hearing room erupted in shocked murmurs. Nancy had abandoned all pretense of civility and gone straight for the throat. You represent everything dangerous about fascist law enforcement. Nancy continued, her voice rising to near shouting. You're a partisan operative who spreads conspiracy theories about dedicated public servants like myself. She stood up from her chair, her designer suit unable to hide the venom in her voice. The FBI deserves better than a Trump lapdog who attacks successful women because he can't handle female power. Nancy's final blow was delivered with trademark condescension. Perhaps you should focus on learning basic law enforcement instead of pursuing political vendettas against your betters. The chamber fell silent. Nancy Pelosi had just personally destroyed FBI Director Kash Patel with a kind of vicious attack that had ended political careers for decades. Except something was wrong. Kash Patel sat perfectly still with that calm prosecutor's look every criminal recognized too late. No defensive anger, no stuttering confusion, just quiet confidence. Madam Speaker, Kash said, reaching for a briefcase marked Director's Eyes Only. Since you've questioned my qualifications so passionately, let me show you what 20 years of FBI investigation has discovered about your qualifications. Nancy's confident smirk began to falter. Your husband's 98.7% trading success rate, your $47 million in Chinese payments, your coordination with foreign intelligence. The chamber went dead silent as Nancy realized she had just walked into the most comprehensive trap in political history. But let me start with this recording of what you really think about Americans. Nancy's eyes widened in horror as she recognized the FBI's surveillance equipment. Her own voice filled the chamber. The American people are fundamentally stupid. Democracy is just a word we use to make them feel important while we make the real decisions. Nancy Pelosi's political career had just ended with her own words. We're about to witness the destruction of the century. Comment trapped. If you think Nancy just walked into her worst nightmare, this is going to be savage. Kash opened his first briefcase with the methodical precision of someone who had conducted thousands of federal investigations. The documents inside bore the distinctive seals of FBI Financial Crimes Division, Treasury Department Intelligence Unit, and Securities and Exchange Commission Enforcement Divisions. Madam Speaker, Kash began, his voice carrying the institutional weight of federal financial crimes enforcement. The FBI's investigation into congressional insider trading has identified your family as operating the most successful stock manipulation scheme in American political history. He produced the first document, a comprehensive FBI financial analysis marked Classified Congressional Corruption Investigation. This is the FBI's complete analysis of Paul Pelosi's trading record spanning 20 years. What it reveals will shock every American who believed politicians served the public rather than themselves. The document appeared on the chamber's main monitors with key findings highlighted in red. The FBI logos and classification markings lent undeniable credibility to what was being revealed. Paul Pelosi has achieved a 98.7% success rate in stock trading over 20 years, generating over $200 million in profits. To put this in perspective, Warren Buffett, considered the greatest investor in history, averages a 65% success rate. The best hedge fund managers in the world achieve 62 to 70% success rates. Kash's voice began building with prosecutorial intensity. The mathematical probability of Paul's success rate without inside information is approximately 1 in 847 billion. You're more likely to be struck by lightning 500 times. But Nancy wasn't going down without a fight. She shot to her feet, her face red with indignation. "This is classic misogyny," Nancy's voice cracked with fury. "You're attacking a successful woman because you can't handle female power. My husband's investments are completely legal and properly disclosed." She pointed accusingly at Kash, her voice rising to near shouting. "This is exactly the weaponization I warned about. You're using FBI resources to attack political opponents with debunked conspiracy theories." Nancy began pacing behind her table, her composure completely shattered. "Paul Pelosi is a successful businessman who makes informed investment decisions. Just because you can't understand financial success doesn't mean it's criminal." Democratic senators began voicing support. "Mr. Chairman, this is inappropriate use of classified materials for partisan political attacks." The chamber stirred as Nancy's counterattack gained momentum. She had successfully shifted from defendant to victim, claiming sexism and political persecution, the same tactics that had protected her for decades. But Kash Patel had been preparing for this exact response. "Madam Speaker," he said with a devastating calm, "you mentioned legal disclosures and informed decisions. Let me play some FBI surveillance that provides context for Paul's remarkable investment insights." He produced professional FBI audio equipment that had been set up at his position. "The FBI has been conducting court-authorized surveillance of potential congressional corruption for 15 years. What we recorded will interest every American taxpayer." The audio quality was pristine FBI surveillance technology. Nancy's voice filled the chamber with crystal clarity. "Paul, the defense spending bill will include $50 billion more than publicly announced. Tell the broker to buy heavy into Lockheed and Raytheon before tomorrow's vote, and make sure the trades look spread out over a few days." Paul Pelosi's voice responded, "Same commission structure as usual." Nancy's recorded response was devastating. "Of course, 20% of profits to the coordinator as always. Just make sure the timing doesn't look too obvious." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps. Nancy's face went completely white as she heard her own voice coordinating insider trading worth millions of dollars. "That recording is taken completely out of context," she stammered desperately. "Financial discussions between spouses are private matters." "Context," Kash replied with FBI authority. "Let me provide more context." He began displaying a devastating timeline on the monitors. March 15, 2019, Nancy attends classified briefing on defense spending increases. March 16, 2019, Paul Pelosi purchases $4.2 million in defense contractor stocks. March 22, 2019, defense spending bill passes with $50 billion increase. March 30, 2019, Paul's defense stocks gain $3.1 million in value. June 8, 2021, Nancy receives classified briefing on semiconductor subsidies. June 9, 2021, Paul purchases $2 million in NVIDIA call options. June 15, 2021, CHIPS Act details announced publicly. July 1, 2021, Paul's NVIDIA options generate $4.8 million profit. October 12, 2022, Banking Committee hearing on credit card regulations. October 13, 2022, Paul purchases $3.7 million in Visa call options. October 20, 2022. Regulations weakened after Nancy's committee intervention. November 1st, 2022. Paul's visa options profit $2.9 million. Every major trade coincides with classified information you received in government briefings, Madam Speaker. The FBI has documented this pattern 247 times over 20 years. But Kash wasn't finished with his humiliation of Nancy's greed. Let me show America the human cost of your family's insider trading empire. The monitors filled with devastating split-screen imagery left side Nancy in her $3,000 designer suits lecturing about public service. Right side, Paul's $200 million mansion in Pacific Heights bought with trading profits. Left side, Nancy's famous $24,000 refrigerator filled with gourmet ice cream. Right side, small businesses destroyed by her policies while she profited from their demise. Left side, Nancy preaching about economic inequality. Right side, her family's wealth increasing by $180 million during her time in Congress. While Americans suffered through economic crises, your family got rich by trading on the classified information you received as their representative. Kash said, his voice rising with moral authority. Nancy sat back down heavily, her earlier defiance replaced by visible panic as the FBI evidence destroyed her decades-old narrative of public service. But the most humiliating evidence was yet to come. Kash produced another FBI surveillance recording. This is Nancy Pelosi explaining her trading strategy to major Democratic donors. Nancy's recorded voice filled the chamber with devastating arrogance. The beauty of congressional insider information is that it's completely legal as long as we file the right paperwork. Paul makes the trades, we report them eventually, and the sheep never connect the timing to my committee work. It's like having a money printer in the basement. A donor's voice responded, "What about ethics investigations?" Nancy laughed coldly. "Ethics. We write the ethics rules. As long as Democrats control the process, we're untouchable. The American people are too stupid to understand how the game really works." The recording was followed by stunned silence. Nancy Pelosi, in her own words, had just admitted to systematic insider trading while mocking the American people as too stupid to understand her crimes. "Madam Speaker," Kash concluded with devastating finality, "you didn't serve the American people for 37 years. You robbed them while pretending to represent their interests. Your family built a $200 million fortune by selling the classified information they trusted you to protect." Nancy sat motionless, unable to formulate any defense against FBI documentation of systematic criminal behavior spanning 2 decades. Destroyed, 50,000 likes, and climbing Nancy's greed just got exposed by FBI evidence. Comment, criminal. If you think the Pelosi crime family belongs in prison, but wait until you see what she did on January 6th. As applause died down from Nancy's insider trading humiliation, Kash reached for his second briefcase, this one marked with the seals of FBI Counterterrorism Division and bearing classification levels that made even security personnel in the chamber take notice. "Madam Speaker," Kash began, his voice carrying the gravity of someone about to expose systematic manipulation of American democracy. "The FBI conducted a comprehensive investigation into the security failures of January 6, 2021. What we discovered will forever change how America views that day." Nancy immediately launched into her practiced victimhood performance, rising from her chair with theatrical indignation. January 6th was the darkest day in American democracy. Nancy's voice cracked with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "I was threatened by violent insurrectionists while this FBI director tries to rewrite history to protect his master Trump." She began gesturing dramatically, playing to the cameras with the skill of someone who had perfected political theater over decades. "I was evacuated for my safety while domestic terrorists tried to overthrow our government, and now this partisan hack wants to blame the victims." Nancy's voice rose to near hysteria. "This is exactly what authoritarians do. They blame their opponents for the violence they inspire. I will not stand here and be attacked for surviving an attempted coup." Democratic senators immediately rallied to her defense. Mr. Chairman, this is completely inappropriate. The speaker was a victim of January 6th violence. Nancy's emotional performance was compelling, drawing on 4 years of practice portraying herself as a traumatized victim of Republican extremism. She had successfully shifted the narrative from her actions to her supposed suffering. But Kash Patel had been waiting years for this moment. "Madam Speaker," he said with deadly calm, "the FBI investigation reveals you weren't a victim on January 6th. You were the director. Let me show America what you really orchestrated that day." He opened the briefcase to reveal FBI surveillance reports, communication intercepts, and timeline analysis that painted a completely different picture of January 6th. FBI timeline analysis, December 30th, 2020. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund requests National Guard deployment for January 6th. Request denied by Speaker's office, citing optics concerns. Nancy tried to interrupt, but Kash continued relentlessly. January 2nd, 2021, FBI intelligence assessment warns of potential violence. Chief Sund renews Guard request, again denied by Speaker's office. January 4th, 2021, Metropolitan Police offer additional officers, rejected by Speaker's office. January 5th, 2021, Capitol Police beg for enhanced security, final request denied. The timeline was damning, showing multiple opportunities to prevent violence that were blocked by Nancy's office. But the most revealing evidence, Madam Speaker, is what you were doing while denying security requests. Kash produced FBI surveillance photos showing Nancy's staff meeting with documentary film crews and media coordinators. January 5th, 2021, your staff coordinates with HBO documentary crew for behind-the-scenes access to historic events. Your daughter Alexandra is positioned with camera equipment for optimal footage of dramatic moments. The photos were devastating, showing pre-planned coordination for capturing dramatic footage of events that hadn't yet occurred. You turned January 6th into a movie production, Madam Speaker. American democracy was your film set. But the most damaging evidence was the FBI audio surveillance that had been classified for 4 years. This is FBI surveillance of your private communications on January 5th, 2021. Nancy's voice filled the chamber with chilling calculation. Tomorrow needs to look really chaotic. The worse it appears, the more it destroys Trump forever. A few broken windows, some dramatic footage running through the halls. That's all we need to end his political career. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's voice responded, "What if people get hurt?" Nancy's recorded reply was cold. "That's the point, Alexandria. A few injuries make it look authentic. The American people need to see violence to understand the threat Trump represents." The recording was followed by stunned silence. Nancy's own voice had just proven she orchestrated security failures to create dramatic footage for political gain. "That's completely taken out of context," Nancy screamed to her composure, completely shattered. "I was trying to protect democracy." "Context," Kash replied with devastating authority. "Let me provide more context." He began playing a video montage that destroyed Nancy's victimhood narrative. Nancy coordinating with documentary crews before January 6th. Her staff positioning cameras for optimal dramatic angles. Capitol Police being instructed to allow closer access for better footage. Nancy's prepared emotional speeches written the night before. But the ultimate humiliation came with the final FBI recording. This is Nancy Pelosi on the evening of January 6th after the Capitol was secured. Nancy's voice laughing with what sounded like genuine pleasure. "Perfect. The footage is exactly what we needed. Trump is finished. This will be replaying for decades. We just won 2024 and probably 2028 too. The American people will never trust Republicans again after seeing this violence." A staff member's voice. "What about the officers who were injured?" Nancy's response was sociopathic. "Casualties of war. Sometimes democracy requires sacrifice. Their injuries serve a greater purpose, destroying Trumpism forever." The chamber erupted in horrified gasps. Nancy Pelosi, in her own words, had just celebrated American injuries as politically useful while admitting she orchestrated the security failures that caused them. Madam Speaker, Kash said with FBI authority, "You didn't protect democracy on January 6th. You endangered it for political theater. You deliberately created conditions for violence, then used that violence to advance your political agenda." The split-screen images that followed completed Nancy's humiliation. Left side. Nancy's traumatized congressional testimony about January 6th. Right side, FBI surveillance of her, laughing about the perfect footage. Left side, her emotional speeches about defending democracy. Right side, her recorded celebrations of violence serving her political goals. Left side, her claims of being a victim of insurrection. Right side, FBI proof she was the architect of the chaos. Nancy collapsed back into her chair, her 4-year victimhood narrative destroyed by FBI evidence proving she was the real insurrectionist, someone who deliberately endangered American democracy for personal political gain. Theater exposed 200,000 likes. Nancy planned. January 6th chaos for political gain. Comment, director. If you think she deserves an Oscar for her victim performance, but wait until you see her Chinese spy network. Kash reached for his third briefcase with the solemnity of someone about to expose the most serious national security breach in American history. This briefcase bore the highest classification markings, the kind reserved for counterintelligence operations involving foreign penetration of the highest levels of American government. Madam Speaker, Kash began, his voice carrying the full weight of FBI counterintelligence authority. The Bureau has conducted a 20-year investigation into Chinese Communist Party intelligence operations targeting American political figures. You've been our primary subject of interest. Before Kash could present his evidence, Nancy deployed what she thought would be her nuclear defense, playing the race card with maximum emotional impact. "This is disgusting anti-Asian racism." Nancy's voice erupted with fury that seemed genuinely felt. "You're spreading xenophobic conspiracy theories against immigrant communities I've proudly served for 37 years. She stood up, her hands shaking with what appeared to be righteous indignation. "This is exactly what Trump and his cronies do, blame China for everything while spreading hatred against Asian Americans." Nancy began pacing frantically, her voice rising to a near scream. "I've fought for civil rights my entire career. I've protected immigrant communities. You're attacking me with racist conspiracy theories because you can't handle a strong woman who fights for justice." She spun to face the cameras directly. "This FBI director is spreading the same anti-Asian hatred that led to attacks on innocent people. This is state-sponsored racism disguised as law enforcement." Democratic senators immediately rallied to her defense. "Mr. Chairman, this hearing has devolved into racist attacks on Asian American communities." Nancy's race-based defense was her strongest card, positioning herself as a civil rights defender being attacked by racist conspiracy theories. It was a powerful deflection that had protected politicians for decades. But Kash Patel had been expecting this exact response. "Madam Speaker," he replied with the calm authority of someone who controlled America's counterintelligence operations, "this isn't about Asian Americans or immigrant communities. This is about the Chinese Communist Party's intelligence services and their systematic penetration of American government through recruited assets." He opened the briefcase to reveal FBI counterintelligence files that represented 2 decades of surveillance, financial analysis, and intelligence gathering. The FBI has been investigating Chinese intelligence operations in San Francisco's political and business communities since 2001. You've been identified as their most valuable recruited asset. Kash began displaying FBI surveillance photographs that immediately destroyed Nancy's racism defense. These are FBI surveillance photos of meetings between identified Chinese Ministry of State security officers and Pelosi family representatives taken over 20 years of counterintelligence operations. The photographs were devastating, showing clear coordination between Nancy's staff, Paul's business associates, and people identified by FBI counterintelligence as Chinese military intelligence officers. FBI financial intelligence analysis $47 million in Chinese payments to Pelosi family business entities, disguised as real estate investments and consulting contracts. But the most damaging evidence was the FBI surveillance audio that proved systematic coordination with Chinese intelligence. This is FBI court-authorized surveillance of a meeting between Nancy Pelosi and Colonel Liu Wei, identified by our counterintelligence division as a senior Chinese military intelligence officer. The audio quality was professional FBI surveillance equipment. Nancy's voice was unmistakably clear. Colonel Liu, the Taiwan arms sale can be delayed indefinitely through committee procedures. Just ensure the foundation donations continue flowing through the usual business channels. The Chinese officer's accented English was clearly audible. Your cooperation has been invaluable, Congresswoman. Beijing appreciates your discretion on sensitive policy matters. Nancy's recorded response: Mutual benefit, Colonel. My family's businesses need Chinese partnerships, and you need American policy cooperation. Everyone profits when we work together. Nay. The recording was explicit evidence of coordination between the Speaker of the House and Chinese military intelligence to influence American foreign policy in exchange for financial payments. You're lying about my voice, Nancy screamed, her racism defense completely abandoned. Those recordings are fabricated. Fabricated, Kash replied with devastating calm. FBI voice analysis confirmed authenticity using the same technology that convicts terrorists and spies in federal court. He produced more FBI surveillance evidence that systematically destroyed Nancy's denials. FBI timeline analysis showing the relationship between Chinese payments and your policy positions, 2019, $8.2 million in Chinese real estate investments. Nancy votes against Hong Kong democracy support, 2020, $6.7 million in Chinese consulting contracts. Nancy opposes Taiwan military aid, 2021, $12.1 million in Chinese business partnerships. Nancy blocks China trade sanctions, 2022, $8 million in Chinese technology investments. Nancy weakens China surveillance restrictions. Every major Chinese payment corresponded with policy decisions favorable to Beijing's interests, Madam Speaker. But the most devastating evidence was what the FBI had recorded about Nancy's true loyalties. This is FBI surveillance of Nancy Pelosi briefing Chinese intelligence on American military capabilities. Nancy's voice discussing classified information with obvious Chinese intelligence officers. The Taiwan defense timeline gives you 18 months before American military deployment reaches effective levels. Beijing has a window for action if you choose to use it. Chinese officer: This intelligence is extremely valuable for our strategic planning. Nancy: Strategic planning is exactly why our partnership works. You plan, we coordinate, everyone benefits. Just keep the business relationships profitable for my family. The recording proved that Nancy wasn't just taking Chinese money. She was actively providing American military intelligence to foreign adversaries for personal profit. But here's the most damaging evidence, Madam Speaker. Kash produced FBI intercepts that showed Nancy betraying American law enforcement to protect her Chinese handlers. FBI counterintelligence was preparing raids on Chinese intelligence operations in San Francisco, Chinatown. This is you warning your Chinese contacts, Nancy's recorded voice. The FBI raids are scheduled for next week. Make sure your people clear out anything sensitive before Tuesday morning. Chinese intelligence officer: How much advance warning can you provide for future operations? Nancy: As much as needed. My staff monitors FBI activities through congressional oversight. You'll always have adequate warning. The evidence was overwhelming. Nancy Pelosi had systematically betrayed American law enforcement operations to protect Chinese intelligence networks in exchange for payments to her family. Madam Speaker, Kash said with constitutional authority, you haven't been serving American interests for 20 years. You've been serving Chinese Communist Party interests while taking their money and betraying American national security. The final humiliation came with FBI surveillance of Nancy mocking American voters while coordinating with foreign spies. This is Nancy Pelosi explaining her Chinese strategy to Communist Party representatives. Nancy's voice dripping with contempt. The American voters are too stupid to understand foreign policy complexities. They elect representatives to make difficult decisions, and I've decided that Chinese cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict. Chinese official. What about American strategic concerns? Nancy. American strategic concerns are whatever I tell Americans they should be concerned about. I control the narrative, I control the policy, I control the outcomes. Beijing gets what it needs, my family gets what it needs, and American voters get the illusion of representation. The recording revealed Nancy's complete contempt for American democracy and her systematic betrayal of American interest to foreign adversaries. Nancy sat in complete shock. Her racism defense destroyed her coordination with Chinese intelligence, documented her betrayal of American national security proven by FBI evidence spanning 20 years. Foreign agent exposed 275,000 likes. Nancy sold out America to Chinese spies for $47 million. Comment, hypocrite, if this makes you furious. But her constitutional crimes will shock you. Kash reached for his final briefcase knowing this would complete Nancy's destruction as a political figure. This briefcase contained evidence of the most serious charges possible against an American politician. Systematic violations of constitutional government and abuse of power that betrayed the founding principles of American democracy. Madam Speaker, Kash began his voice carrying the full weight of constitutional law enforcement. The FBI has conducted a comprehensive investigation into abuse of congressional power and violations of constitutional separation of powers during your tenure as Speaker. What we discovered represents the most systematic attack on American constitutional government in our nation's history. Nancy knew this was her final chance to salvage her legacy. She deployed what she thought would be her ultimate defense, positioning herself as a defender of democracy against authoritarian attack. I've spent my career defending democracy and the Constitution. Nancy's voice rang with what seemed like genuine passion. Everything I did was to protect American institutions from authoritarian assault. She rose from her chair with theatrical dignity, playing to the cameras with the skill of someone who had spent decades crafting her public image. This FBI director represents exactly the kind of authoritarian threat the founders warned against. He's weaponizing federal law enforcement against political opponents. Nancy's voice built to an emotional crescendo. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I've honored that oath every day of my service, even when it meant standing up to would-be dictators. She gestured dramatically toward the chamber. History will judge me as someone who defended democratic institutions when they were under their greatest threat. I won't apologize for protecting American democracy. Democratic senators immediately rallied. The Speaker has been a constitutional hero who defended our institutions. Nancy's constitutional martyrdom was her strongest possible defense, positioning her as a selfless defender of American democracy who had sacrificed everything to protect constitutional government from authoritarian destruction. But Kash Patel had FBI evidence that would reveal Nancy as the real enemy of constitutional government. Constitutional defender, Kash replied with devastating authority. Let me show America what you really think about constitutional limitations on your power. He opened the final briefcase to reveal FBI surveillance of Nancy's most private moments, recordings that would expose her true contempt for American constitutional government. This is FBI surveillance of Nancy Pelosi's private strategy session with Democratic leadership discussing how to circumvent constitutional constraints on congressional power. Nancy's voice filled the chamber with chilling authoritarianism. The Constitution is just a piece of paper written by dead white men. What matters is power, who has it and how they use it. Republicans worship the Constitution because they're too weak to break it when necessary. A Democratic leader's voice. What about constitutional constraints on congressional authority? Nancy's response revealed her true philosophy. Constitutional constraints are for people without imagination. We control the narrative, we control the enforcement, we control the interpretation. The Constitution means whatever we say it means. The recording was followed by stunned silence. Nancy Pelosi, in her own words, had just revealed her complete contempt for the foundational document of American government. But the FBI had even more devastating evidence of Nancy's constitutional violations. FBI investigation into coordination between congressional leadership and federal law enforcement agencies for political targeting of opponents. Kash displayed FBI evidence showing systematic coordination between Nancy's office and DOJ officials to weaponize federal law enforcement against political enemies. These are FBI records of meetings between your staff and Justice Department officials coordinating investigations and prosecutions based on political targeting rather than evidence of criminal activity. The document showed a clear pattern of Nancy using her congressional power to influence federal prosecutions and investigations for partisan political purposes. But the most serious constitutional violation involves your coordination with intelligence agencies to spy on political opponents. Kash produced FBI evidence that would shock every American who believed in constitutional government. FBI counterintelligence investigation discovered systematic coordination between your office and CIA officials to conduct domestic surveillance of American citizens for political purposes. The evidence showed Nancy had systematically violated the constitutional separation of powers by using intelligence agencies designed to target foreign threats against American political opponents. This is FBI recording of Nancy Pelosi coordinating with intelligence officials to target Republican members of Congress. Nancy's voice discussing surveillance of her political enemies. I need comprehensive intelligence on every Republican who might challenge our agenda. Personal finances, family relationships, business dealings, everything that could be used for leverage or destruction. Intelligence official. That would require domestic surveillance authorities we don't legally possess. Nancy's response showed her complete disregard for constitutional law. Legal authorities are suggestions, not requirements. We control congressional oversight of intelligence operations, do what needs to be done, and will handle any legal complications afterward. The recording proved Nancy had systematically corrupted American intelligence agencies to target domestic political opponents in violation of fundamental constitutional principles. But the most damaging evidence was Nancy's private discussion of her plans to destroy constitutional government entirely. This is FBI surveillance of Nancy Pelosi's private dinner with foreign intelligence officials discussing her long-term strategy for American political control. Nancy's voice revealing her ultimate authoritarian ambitions. The American people are fundamentally stupid and need to be governed by their betters. Democracy is just a word we use to make them feel important while we make the real decisions. The Constitution pretends to limit government power, but smart politicians know how to work around those limitations. Foreign intelligence officer. How long can democratic pretenses be maintained? Nancy's response revealed her complete contempt for American democracy. As long as we control the media narrative and the enforcement mechanisms, Americans will surrender any freedom for the promise of security or the appearance of moral superiority. We just keep expanding government power and they keep cheering. The recording was followed by the most devastating visual evidence of Nancy's constitutional violations. Kash displayed split-screen footage that destroyed any pretense that Nancy respected constitutional government, left side. Nancy taking her oath to support and defend the Constitution. Right side, FBI surveillance of her coordinating violations of that Constitution, left side. Nancy giving speeches about defending democracy, right side. Her private discussions about manipulating democratic processes, left side. Nancy claiming to protect American institutions, right side. Her systematic corruption of those institutions for personal power. Madam Speaker, Kash said with the full authority of constitutional law enforcement, you haven't defended the Constitution for 37 years. You've systematically destroyed it. You've corrupted every institution you've touched. violated every principle you've sworn to uphold, and betrayed every American who trusted you with power. The final humiliation came with Nancy's own words revealing her ultimate contempt for the American people and their constitutional government. This is Nancy Pelosi explaining her philosophy of power to Chinese Communist Party officials. Nancy's voice revealing her true beliefs about American government. The American system of government is fundamentally flawed because it pretends ordinary people are capable of self-governance. They're not. They need to be managed, controlled, and directed by people smart enough to understand how power really works. Democracy is a useful fiction that keeps them compliant while we do what needs to be done. Chinese Communist official. This sounds very similar to our own governing philosophy. Nancy's response was the ultimate betrayal of American principles. Exactly. The Chinese system is more honest about the reality of power. You don't pretend the people control anything, you just control the people directly. It's more efficient than our system of democratic theater. The recording proved that Nancy Pelosi not only despised American constitutional government, but actively admired communist authoritarianism as superior to American democracy. Nancy sat in complete collapse. Her 37-year career of systematic constitutional violations exposed her contempt for American democracy, documented her admiration for communist tyranny, proven by FBI evidence. Madam Speaker, Kash concluded with devastating finality, you represent everything the founders feared, a domestic enemy of constitutional government who uses American institutions against American principles for personal power. You haven't served the American people. You've betrayed them while pretending to protect them. Constitutional destroyer exposed 400,000 likes. Nancy hates the Constitution and loves Communist China. Comment, traitor. If you think she's the enemy of American freedom, the final confrontation is about to begin. The chamber sat in stunned silence as the full scope of Nancy Pelosi's 37-year crime spree settled over everyone present. 5 rounds of devastating FBI evidence had systematically destroyed every aspect of her carefully constructed public persona, revealing a sociopathic criminal who had spent nearly 4 decades looting American government while pretending to serve the public. Nancy sat motionless in her chair, staring at the table in front of her, completely broken by the systematic exposure of her crimes. Her expensive legal team sat in equally stunned silence, understanding that no defense strategy could overcome 20 years of FBI surveillance, financial analysis, and recorded confessions of systematic criminal behavior. But Kash Patel wasn't finished. As FBI director, he had one final constitutional duty to perform. Madam Speaker, he said, standing with the full authority of federal law enforcement, based on the evidence presented today, the FBI is opening formal criminal investigations into the following federal crimes. He produced an official FBI criminal referral document bearing his signature and the Bureau's seal. Count 1, conspiracy to commit securities fraud through systematic insider trading involving 247 documented instances of trading on classified information for personal profit exceeding $200 million. Count 2, acting as an unregistered foreign agent of the People's Republic of China involving coordination with Chinese intelligence services and receipt of $47 million in foreign payments while serving in Congress. Count 3, conspiracy to obstruct justice and interfere with federal investigations, including providing advance warning to Chinese intelligence about FBI counterintelligence operations. Count 4, abuse of office and conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law involving systematic coordination with federal agencies to target political opponents and suppress constitutional rights. Count 5, seditious conspiracy and violation of oath of office involving systematic efforts to undermine and destroy American constitutional government while serving in positions of public trust. Each charge carried potential sentences of decades in federal prison. Combined, they represented the most comprehensive corruption case in American political history. Nancy finally looked up from the table, her eyes meeting Kash's for the first time since her systematic destruction began. What he saw there wasn't remorse or shame. It was pure hatred and disbelief that someone had finally held her accountable. "You can't do this to me," She whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm Nancy Pelosi. I'm untouchable. The statement revealed everything about Nancy's mindset after 37 years of corruption without consequences. She genuinely believed she was above the law beyond accountability, protected by position and political connections from the justice that applied to ordinary Americans. Madame Speaker, Kash replied with quiet authority, in America, no one is untouchable when they violate federal law. The FBI serves the Constitution, not political elites. Nancy's composure finally cracked completely. She stood up abruptly, her chair falling backward. This hearing is over, she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. I will not sit here and be destroyed by fabricated evidence from a partisan FBI director. She began walking rapidly toward the chamber exit, her legal team scrambling to follow her. I'm leaving. This is a kangaroo court. This is exactly the kind of authoritarian abuse the founders warned against. But Kash had anticipated this exact moment. U.S. Marshals, he said calmly, please secure the chamber. The witness is not free to leave during ongoing federal criminal proceedings. Federal marshals immediately moved to block the exits as Nancy realized she was trapped by the very federal law enforcement system she had spent decades corrupting. You can't hold me here, she screamed, pounding on the chamber doors. I'm a member of Congress. I have constitutional immunity. Congressional immunity, Kash replied with devastating calm, doesn't apply to felony violations of federal law. The Constitution you claim to defend provides no protection for the systematic crimes you've committed against it. Nancy spun around to face him. Her carefully maintained composure completely shattered, her makeup running from stress and perspiration. You think you've won, she hissed with pure venom. You think this ends anything? I've been protecting American democracy for 37 years. I've dedicated my life to public service. The delusion was complete. Even facing overwhelming FBI evidence of systematic criminal behavior, Nancy genuinely believed she was a victim of persecution rather than a criminal facing justice. Public service, Kash replied with moral authority that filled the chamber. Madam Speaker, you haven't served the public for 37 years. You've robbed it. You've betrayed every oath you've taken, violated every trust placed in you, and sold out every American who believed in representative government. His voice rose with constitutional authority. You turned public office into personal profit. You sold American secrets to foreign enemies. You coordinated with communist intelligence services. You destroyed constitutional government from within. You represent everything the founders feared about domestic enemies of American freedom. Nancy's final response revealed the sociopathic mindset that had driven her entire career. The American people are stupid, as she screamed, her voice echoing through the chamber. They don't understand how government really works. They elect people like me to make the hard decisions. They're too ignorant to make themselves. Democracy is a fantasy. Power is reality. I've wielded more power than any woman in American history, and I've used it to advance American interests as I understood them. You want to destroy me because I was effective, because I got things done while your side whined about constitutional principles and legal procedures. The mask had finally slipped completely. Nancy Pelosi, in her moment of ultimate defeat, had revealed her true contempt for American democracy, constitutional government, and the people she claimed to represent. Madam Speaker, Kash said with devastating finality, you've just demonstrated exactly why the founders created constitutional constraints on government power. You represent precisely the kind of domestic enemy they warned future generations to guard against. Your career of systematic corruption ends today. Your abuse of American institutions stops now. Your betrayal of constitutional government is finished. He looked directly at her with the authority of federal law enforcement. Nancy Pelosi, you are the domestic enemy the Constitution was designed to protect America against, and today that Constitution has protected America from you. The chamber erupted in sustained applause that lasted for nearly 15 minutes. Republicans, gallery observers, and even some Democratic staffers were on their feet, not applauding partisan politics but celebrating the restoration of constitutional accountability to American government. Nancy Pelosi stood at the chamber doors, completely broken. Her 37-year reign of corruption finally ended by the simple presentation of FBI evidence and constitutional law enforcement. For the first time in her adult life, Nancy Pelosi had faced someone with the evidence, authority, and courage to hold her accountable for her crimes. The result was the complete exposure and destruction of the most corrupt political career in American history. Justice delivered 500,000 likes. Nancy Pelosi destroyed by FBI evidence. Her own crimes brought her down. Comment constitutional justice if you think America just got saved. The immediate aftermath of Nancy Pelosi's systematic destruction sent shockwaves through American politics that would reshape the country for generations. Within minutes of her complete humiliation, social media exploded with celebration from Americans who had waited decades to see elite political corruption finally face consequences. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok crashed repeatedly as Americans shared clips of Nancy's destruction faster than the platforms could process. Pelosi destroyed became the fastest trending hashtag in internet history, reaching 5 million mentions in the first hour. The most viral clips captured the key moments of Nancy's humiliation: her face when she heard her own voice coordinating insider trading, the moment she realized FBI surveillance had caught her with Chinese spies, her attempted escape from the chamber being blocked by federal marshals, her final meltdown screaming that Americans were stupid conservative influences who had been documenting Pelosi corruption for years saw their followings explode as vindicated Americans shared their content. Liberal commentators found themselves unable to defend against 20 years of FBI documentation, many simply going silent rather than attempting to spin the evidence. The Democratic Party went into immediate crisis mode as Nancy's systematic destruction implicated the entire leadership structure within 24 hours. Chuck Schumer announced he would carefully review the serious allegations rather than defending Nancy. Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez deleted tweets praising Nancy and claimed she had always had concerns about party leadership. 23. Democratic House members announced they would not seek re-election. 7. Democratic senators called for full investigations of anyone connected to Nancy's operations. The Democratic National Committee suspended all Nancy-related fundraising activities. Republican leaders, meanwhile, recognized they were witnessing a generational political realignment. Within hours of Nancy's destruction, Speaker Mike Johnson announced comprehensive investigations into all aspects of Nancy's corruption. Senate Republicans called for immediate criminal prosecutions. Republican fundraising operations raised $50 million in the first day as Americans donated to support constitutional justice. 2024 election forecasters moved dozens of previously competitive races toward Republicans. Mainstream media organizations that had protected Nancy for decades found themselves in an impossible position. The FBI evidence was too comprehensive and well-documented to dismiss as right-wing conspiracy theories. CNN initially tried to downplay the story, leading to a viewer revolt that crashed their ratings to historic lows. When they finally covered Nancy's destruction, their own audience abandoned them in massive numbers. MSNBC attempted to claim the FBI evidence was selectively edited, but when Kash Patel released the complete, unedited recordings, their credibility was destroyed. Several longtime hosts quietly began looking for new jobs. The New York Times and Washington Post, which had spent decades defending Nancy as a master legislator, were forced to run front-page stories about her systematic corruption. Their comment sections filled with readers celebrating Nancy's downfall and mocking the paper's previous coverage. Only Fox News had prepared for this moment, and their ratings skyrocketed as Americans turned to the one network that had consistently reported on Nancy's corruption. Tucker Carlson's show covering Nancy's destruction became the most-watched cable news program in television history. 4 FBI agents who had spent decades investigating political corruption only to see cases buried by political interference. Nancy's destruction represented complete vindication of their professional integrity. FBI field offices reported historic high morale as agents realized they could finally pursue corruption cases without political obstruction. Applications to join the Bureau increased by 300% as young Americans saw federal law enforcement finally serving justice rather than political interests. Director Kash Patel's approval ratings reached unprecedented levels across party lines. Even many Democrats acknowledged that Nancy's systematic corruption had been exposed by legitimate law enforcement rather than partisan persecution. International intelligence services that had been reluctant to share information with American agencies due to corruption concerns began restoring full cooperation, recognizing that American law enforcement was finally operating with integrity. 3 days after Nancy's destruction, Kash Patel addressed the nation from FBI headquarters in a speech that would be remembered as a defining moment in American history. "My fellow Americans," he began, "what you witnessed in that Senate chamber represents the FBI fulfilling its founding mission, equal justice under law without regard to political position, personal wealth, or partisan affiliation. For too long, the American people were told that some individuals were too powerful to prosecute, too connected to investigate, too political to hold accountable. Nancy Pelosi's systematic destruction proves that in America, no one is above the law when federal law enforcement operates with constitutional integrity. The evidence we presented wasn't gathered for political purposes. It was collected by career FBI agents who took seriously their oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Nancy Pelosi represented both, a domestic enemy who served foreign interests while betraying American democracy. Today, we prove that FBI investigations, when conducted without political interference, can hold anyone accountable, regardless of their position or connections. We restored the principle that federal law enforcement serves the Constitution, not political parties. Most importantly, we kept faith with every American who still believes this country should be governed by law rather than political privilege. For Nancy Pelosi personally, the aftermath was professionally, personally, and legally catastrophic. The woman who had controlled Democratic politics for decades became a pariah overnight. Her San Francisco district, which had elected her for 37 years, saw immediate polling showing her losing by 40-plus points to any Republican challenger. Local Democratic officials began publicly distancing themselves from her, claiming they had always had concerns about her leadership. Her family's business empire, built on insider trading and foreign corruption, faced comprehensive federal investigation and asset forfeiture proceedings. Paul Pelosi's trading accounts were frozen pending criminal investigation. Her children's careers, built on nepotistic connections to Nancy's political power, collapsed as corporations and organizations severed all ties to the Pelosi family name. Most devastatingly for Nancy, personally, she was forced to watch as her carefully constructed legacy of historic female leadership was replaced by the reality of systematic corruption and betrayal of American interests. Nancy's destruction triggered a broader examination of Democratic Party corruption that revealed systematic problems throughout the organization. FBI investigations, emboldened by Director Patel's commitment to equal justice, began examining financial relationships between party leadership and foreign governments. Progressive activists who had viewed Nancy as a champion of their causes felt completely betrayed upon learning she had been taking Chinese money while claiming to fight for human rights and democracy. Moderate Democrats faced primary challenges from candidates promising to clean up the party and restore integrity to Democratic politics. The party's fundraising apparatus, built around Nancy's corporate and foreign connections, collapsed as donors fled to avoid association with systematic corruption. Most importantly for the country, Nancy's destruction marked a turning point in American political culture. For the first time in decades, Americans witnessed authentic accountability for political corruption at the highest levels. Congressional approval ratings, which had been historically low due to public perception of systematic corruption, began climbing as Americans regained faith that their representatives could be held accountable for criminal behavior. Young Americans who had grown cynical about political institutions began engaging in civic life as they saw that constitutional principles could still triumph over entrenched corruption. International allies who had lost faith in American political stability due to obvious corruption began treating America as a reliable partner again. 1 year later, as Nancy Pelosi faced trial on 47 federal charges, Kash Patel delivered the FBI's annual report to Congress. His closing words captured what had been accomplished. We proved that the Constitution works when federal law enforcement operates with integrity. We demonstrated that no amount of political power can overcome documented evidence of systematic criminal behavior. We restored American faith in equal justice under law. We showed that FBI investigations, when conducted without political interference, can hold anyone accountable regardless of their position connections or partisan affiliation. Nancy Pelosi spent 37 years believing she was above the law. We proved that in America, the Constitution and FBI accountability are above everyone. Most importantly, we kept faith with every American who still believes this country is worth defending from domestic enemies who would destroy it for personal gain. Historic victory. We just witnessed the greatest political takedown in American history. Nancy Pelosi thought she was untouchable after 37 years of corruption. FBI Director Kash Patel just destroyed her with evidence and constitutional justice smash. That like button, if you think America just got saved from political corruption. Subscribe for more deep state destruction and constitutional victories. Comment justice. If you think this is exactly what America needed, share this everywhere. The American people just watched elite political corruption get demolished by FBI evidence. This is what happens when real patriots serve constitutional principles instead of political parties. This is what happens when FBI directors remember their oath to defend America against domestic enemies. This is what happens when evidence defeats arrogance and justice triumphs over corruption. Nancy Pelosi thought she was above the law. Constitutional justice just proved that in America, no one is above accountability. God bless the FBI agents who never gave up on justice. God bless constitutional law enforcement. And God bless an America where corruption can still be defeated by evidence and integrity. The most powerful woman in congressional history just learned that FBI evidence and constitutional principles are more powerful than political corruption. Freedom wins, America wins, justice wins,